On an ordinary evening, Daniel was walking home after work, taking the same route he always took through the city center. The weather had dropped sharply, and people hurried past each other with their collars turned up and their hands buried deep in their pockets. That was when he noticed a boy sitting alone beside a closed cafe. At first glance, he looked like any other child asking for spare change, but something about him didn't fit the usual picture. His clothes were oversized and worn, yet they were strangely clean compared to the usual street condition. His posture was stiff, not relaxed or slouched like someone tired from hours of begging. His eyes stayed fixed on everyone who walked by, studying them quietly. He didn't reach out his hand or repeat the typical plea. He simply waited, still and silent, like he was hoping someone specific would stop. Daniel slowed down, feeling an unusual tug of concern. The boy looked far too young to be alone, especially on such a cold night. When Daniel approached, the boy didn't look up immediately. Instead, he scanned the street behind Daniel as though checking if someone was watching. When Daniel bent down to offer some coins, the boy finally reacted. But it wasn't the reaction Daniel expected. The boy didn't take the money. Instead, he whispered almost too softly to hear, "Not here, please." His voice trembled. His hands stayed hidden inside his sleeves, holding something tightly. For a moment, Daniel felt unsure whether he should stay or move on. But the fear in the boy's eyes was too real to ignore. This wasn't a simple case of poverty. Something deeper was going on, and Daniel could feel it. Without knowing it, he had stepped into the beginning of a story that would stay with him forever. Daniel stood there for a moment, confused by the boy's reaction. Most children on the street reached for any help they could get, but this boy acted like taking money would put him in danger. His eyes kept moving toward a narrow alley across the road, the kind of place people usually avoided after dark. Daniel followed his gaze, but didn't see anything unusual. Just shadows and a broken streetlight flickering every few seconds. The boy's whisper stayed in Daniel's mind. "Not here." It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. When Daniel gently asked if everything was all right, the boy shook his head almost instantly. He didn't speak. Instead, he lowered his sleeve even more, hiding something inside it as if he was afraid someone might see. Every movement he made was small, careful and tense, like he expected trouble at any moment. Daniel tried again, asking if he wanted food or if he needed a place to warm up. But the boy didn't answer. He just kept watching the alley, as if counting the seconds before something happened. That's when Daniel noticed a second detail. The boy's shoulders kept flinching whenever footsteps passed behind him. He wasn't reacting to strangers. He was reacting to specific sounds. It looked like he was trying to act normal while quietly fighting panic. A sudden gust of cold air blew through the street, and the boy finally leaned forward just enough to whisper again, "Please, not here. They're watching." This time Daniel's stomach tightened. The boy wasn't imagining things. His fear was too real, too focused. Daniel glanced back toward the alley once more. Still nothing. But now the silence felt heavier, almost staged. Something was off, and the boy clearly knew more than he could say out loud. That small moment, an untouched coin in Daniel's hand, a trembling whisper from a child, was the first sign that tonight wasn't just another walk home. Something dangerous was unfolding right in front of him. Daniel stood beside the boy, unsure of what to do next. The street around them was busy enough to feel safe, but the boy behaved like danger was sitting right behind the noise. His hands were still tucked inside his sleeves, gripping something tightly. Daniel gently asked what he meant by "they're watching," hoping he might open up. Instead of answering, the boy looked around one more time, making sure no one was close enough to hear. Then he took a small step forward and slowly pulled something from inside his sleeve. It wasn't money or a personal item. It was a folded piece of paper, creased from being held too tightly and too often. He placed it in Daniel's hand without saying a word. Daniel unfolded it carefully. Inside was a name, a phone number, and a short message written in shaky handwriting. Please call. Don't let them see. The words didn't make immediate sense, but the urgency behind them did. The boy wouldn't look up. He stared at the ground, breathing heavily, waiting for Daniel's reaction. Daniel felt a chill work its way through his chest. This wasn't the behavior of a child begging for money. This was a child trying to signal for help without being caught. But caught by who? And why? He tried to ask, "Who gave you this?" But the boy quickly pressed a finger to his lips, terrified of being overheard. He glanced again at the alley across the road, his fear sharpening as if he expected someone to appear at any moment. A bus passed by, its lights flashing across the pavement, and the boy used the brief cover to whisper, "Please, don't give it back to me. Keep it hidden." Daniel folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. Something inside him shifted from curiosity to responsibility. Whatever this boy was caught in, whatever he was trying to escape, it was real. And now Daniel was part of it.
The man watches this transformation in complete disbelief. The crying, the shaking, the injury, the helpless voice, every bit of it was an act. And now he knows this is not just a sad story. It is something planned, controlled, and much darker than he imagined. Everything changes from this moment.
Daniel kept the note tucked safely in his pocket, trying to stay calm for the boy's sake. He didn't know exactly what was happening, but he knew enough to understand he shouldn't leave the child alone. The boy stayed close to him now, almost hiding behind his arm, watching the street like someone expecting trouble to walk straight toward them. And trouble did. From the same alley the boy had been staring at all along, two adults stepped out. At first glance, they looked like any ordinary couple walking together. They moved slowly, not rushing, as if they didn't want to draw attention. But their eyes told the truth. They weren't scanning the street. They were locked directly onto the boy. The moment he saw them, the boy's entire body tensed. He didn't speak. He simply pressed closer to Daniel, trying to make himself smaller. Daniel felt the shift immediately and followed the boy's gaze. The two adults crossed the road without hesitation, heading straight for them. When they reached the sidewalk, the woman offered a stiff, artificial smile. "There you are," she said, pretending to sound relieved. "We've been looking everywhere for you." The man beside her stepped closer, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, as if he had every right to touch him. The boy flinched so hard that the man's hand slipped off. His reaction wasn't the reaction of a child who had wandered away from guardians. It was the reaction of someone terrified of going back. Daniel stepped slightly forward, blocking their reach. "Is everything all right?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman's smile faded for a moment, replaced by something cold and controlling, before she forced it back. "He's with us," she said sharply, then softened her tone again. "We take care of him." But the boy gave a tiny shake of his head behind Daniel's arm, eyes begging him not to believe them. In that moment, Daniel understood. These weren't concerned adults. The moment the boy shook his head behind Daniel's arm, everything became clear. He didn't need to explain anything. His fear said enough. Daniel felt his pulse jump, but he kept his voice calm. He didn't argue with the adults or accuse them of anything. That would only make things worse. Instead, he gently placed a hand on the boy's back and said, "Come on, let's get somewhere warmer." It sounded casual, but the boy understood instantly. He moved with Daniel without looking back, keeping his head down. The two adults followed, their steps quickening. The woman dropped the fake smile. The man muttered something under his breath, something tense and impatient. Daniel walked toward the nearest open shop he could see. A small convenience store with bright lights and a clear view inside. The shopkeeper was behind the counter, watching the street through the window. As Daniel approached the door with the boy close at his side, the man behind them raised his voice. "He's coming with us," he snapped. "You don't need to get involved." Daniel didn't answer. He pushed the door open and guided the boy inside. The adults tried to follow, but the shopkeeper stepped forward immediately. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew enough to sense danger. Without hesitation, he reached for the door and pulled it shut. The man outside grabbed the handle and yanked, but the shopkeeper held firm. The woman's voice rose sharply, demanding they open the door, claiming the boy belonged to them. Her tone wasn't concerned anymore. It was angry and frantic. Inside the shop, the boy stood frozen, breathing fast, clutching his sleeves again. Daniel crouched to meet his eyes and said, "You're safe for now. Just tell us what's going on." The shopkeeper locked the door properly and pulled down the small metal latch. Outside, the adults kept shouting. Inside, for the first time since Daniel met the boy, there was a moment of real safety. And in that, the shouting outside slowly faded into the background as the shopkeeper stepped closer, ready to help if needed. Daniel waited patiently, giving the boy a moment to breathe. The boy's hands were trembling, and he kept glancing at the door to make sure the two adults hadn't forced their way in. When he finally spoke, his voice was thin and unsure. "They make me sit there," he whispered. "Every day. From morning until late. I'm not allowed to leave unless they say so." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. He asked gently, "Do they hurt you?" The boy nodded, but he didn't go into detail. He didn't have to. His fear explained more than words ever could. The shopkeeper softened his stance, leaning closer so the boy wouldn't have to raise his voice. The boy explained that the adults weren't his family, not by blood or care. They picked him up months ago, promising a place to stay. Instead, they forced him into begging. Every coin he collected, every bit of sympathy he received from strangers, went to them. And if he didn't bring back enough, they punished him. Not loudly, not publicly. They were careful, but they made sure he understood he didn't have a choice. Daniel listened quietly, resisting the urge to interrupt. The boy said he'd been trying to escape for weeks, but he never had a chance. Every time he tried to tell someone, the adults were close enough to stop him. They watched him from the alley, from doorways, even from across the street. He never had a moment alone, until now. "And the note?" Daniel asked. The boy said a woman from a local charity had handed it to him during a rare moment when the adults were distracted. She told him to give it to someone he trusted, someone who noticed his fear. Daniel reached into his pocket and touched the folded paper. For the first time, he truly understood the weight of it. This wasn't a small problem. It was a rescue waiting to happen. The shouting outside slowly faded into the background as the shopkeeper stepped closer, ready to help if needed. Daniel waited patiently, giving the boy a moment to breathe. The boy's hands were trembling, and he kept glancing at the door to make sure the two adults hadn't forced their way in. When he finally spoke, his voice was thin and unsure. "They make me sit there," he whispered. "Every day. From morning until late. I'm not allowed to leave unless they say so." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. He asked gently, "Do they hurt you?" The boy nodded, but he didn't go into detail. He didn't have to. His fear explained more than words ever could. The shopkeeper softened his stance, leaning closer so the boy wouldn't have to raise his voice. The boy explained that the adults weren't his family, not by blood or care. They picked him up months ago, promising a place to stay. Instead, they forced him into begging. Every coin he collected, every bit of sympathy he received from strangers, went to them. And if he didn't bring back enough, they punished him. Not loudly, not publicly. They were careful, but they made sure he understood he didn't have a choice. Daniel listened quietly, resisting the urge to interrupt. The boy said he'd been trying to escape for weeks, but he never had a chance. Every time he tried to tell someone, the adults were close enough to stop him. They watched him from the alley, from doorways, even from across the street. He never had a moment alone, until now. "And the note?" Daniel asked. The boy said a woman from a local charity had handed it to him during a rare moment when the adults were distracted. She told him to give it to someone he trusted, someone who noticed his fear. Daniel reached into his pocket and touched the folded paper. For the first time, he truly understood the weight of it. This wasn't a small problem. It was a rescue waiting to happen.
This is the moment the man realizes the truth. The real enemy isn't the beggar at all. It's the system controlling him. And helping him escape is the only thing that matters now.
Daniel held the folded note tightly in his hand, feeling its weight as if it contained the boy's entire life. He knew he had to act quickly. Without hesitation, he dialed the number written on it. The line rang several times before a calm, professional voice answered. Daniel explained the situation as clearly as he could, keeping the boy close to him. Within minutes, the charity organization confirmed they had been searching for this boy for weeks. They instructed Daniel to stay put and assured him help was on the way. Outside, the two adults were growing impatient, pacing the street and knocking lightly on the shop door. They didn't know the boy had a lifeline now, a way to call for real help. The charity team arrived swiftly, moving with authority and precision. They approached the two adults, who immediately tried to flee, but they were stopped without violence, guided firmly aside by the trained rescuers. Daniel watched as the boy stepped out from behind him for the first time, his small hands shaking but free from the control that had haunted him for months. The boy was led into a waiting vehicle, speaking quietly with one of the team members who reassured him he was finally safe. Daniel stayed on the sidewalk, feeling a mix of relief, disbelief, and awe. He realized how easily someone could mistake exploitation for poverty, how a child's fear could be hidden behind a simple street corner. The adults were taken into custody for questioning. They couldn't threaten him anymore. And as Daniel walked away that night, he felt a strange sense of responsibility lifted. He had stepped in at exactly the right moment. It was a reminder that sometimes what looks like begging is more than that. Sometimes, it's a silent cry for help. And sometimes, one small act of attention can change the course of a life forever.
This entire journey becomes a wake-up call for anyone who gives money without knowing what's really happening behind the scenes. Helping someone isn't just about handing over cash. Sometimes, real help means looking closer, asking questions, and understanding the truth hidden behind the performance. And that truth can save a life.